Okay, good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the City Council special meeting of Wednesday, March 5th. Call the meeting to order, and just for everyone's information, one of our counselors, Eric Oathlander, is not here because he would have to recuse himself anyway. So he is a volunteer firefighter, so he's at his drill. So that's why he's not here today. It's an excused absence in my book. So ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So first, we're going to start out with public comment, and the public comment will be for anything other than the hearing. So is there anyone that would like to make public comment on any subject other than what we're having the public hearing on this evening in the audience? Okay, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to make public comment? If you would raise your hand. Okay. No, nobody in the audience. Okay, so we will go ahead and start the public hearing. This is a continuation of public hearing, APP 2501, appeal by Miller Nash LLP. This is a continuation of a public hearing regarding the appeal by William Rasmussen Miller Nash LLP on behalf of owner Martin and Maxine Siegel Living Trust, appeal of a planning commission decision to deny CU 2405 a conditional use permit for placement of a new shoreline stabilization structure for the purpose of erosion control at 3915 Ocean Avenue, tax lot 41006 BC 00400. I'm going to open the public hearing and ask, does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the City Council to hear this appeal at this time? Does any counselor believe he or she has a personal bias to declare? Does any counselor believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Has any counselor had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit?
Site visit.
Thank you.
Site visit? Okay. Is there any additional correspondence?
Yes, all correspondence has been emailed to counselors and have been posted on the website and also sent to Will Rasmussen.
And what letter are we on? X?
We're on right now, letter X.
Attachment
Okay.
X.
Attachment X. Okay, good. I'm up to date. Okay. So I'd like to request the staff report.
All right, Mayor, Council, good evening. The matter was originally brought before the council during the February 11th, 2025 hearing and was continued because there was information that was not included in the staff report provided to council. Letters and documents, the staff, I included the staff report, the appeal application, the findings and the minutes. A significant portion of the record was missing from the plan commission that I didn't incorporate. I apologize to council and to all those that information that I didn't provide to that record. This evening, the record has been completed and it's included for the council's consideration. It was just mentioned that the attachments in the supplemental staff report went to O, but since that since Tuesday, we've received a number of letters, which basically went from P to X. So there's all that information has now been provided to you. If you may recall, during the scope of review, the council approved this matter to be heard on the record with limited additional evidence in the form of photographs of the site. So it's important when the council is considering the new information and the testimony this evening that it is on the record, and any new evidence other than the photographs may not be considered when making the decision on this matter. A little bit of the history as to how we got here. The Plan Commission rendered a decision to deny the application of Martin and Maxine Siegel's conditional use permit for the placement of a new shoreline stabilization structure for the purpose of erosion control at 3915 Ocean Avenue. William Rasmussen of Miller Nash, on behalf of the owners, Martin and Maxine Siegel, requested review of that decision. And again, during that scope of review meeting with the council, it was determined that it would be heard on the record with limited additional evidence in the form of the photographs. The application involves a request for a conditional use approval to install a vegetated riprap shoreline stabilization structure for the purpose of erosion control. Prior to this application, a conditional use permit and related development permits were issued for the placement and the maintenance of a non-structural sand and cobble revetment, which is no longer present on the property. The application material included in the geotechnical report prepared by Earth Engineers that evaluates other potential means of erosion control at the subject property and recommends a structural stabilization, a vegetated riprap shoreland stabilization structure. And the subject property is eligible for shoreline stabilization structure as development existed on the subject property on January 1 of 1997. The appellants assert that there were several fundamental errors in the Plan Commission's decision. In particular, the appellants argue that the Plan Commission applied the wrong burden of proof standard and that the order does not adequately identify the evidence and facts relied upon or provide sufficient reasoning to support the decision. Appellants also argue that the Plan Commission disregarded expert analysis from its geotechnical engineer. In addition, at the end of their appeal, appellants raised two constitutional issues regarding the privileges and immunities clause and the takings clause. With regards to the specific conditional use permit criteria, the Cannon Beach Municipal Code requires all non-structural shoreline stabilizations to apply for a conditional use in the residential moderate density zone and the oceanfront management zoning districts. And under the city's code, a conditional use must meet 4 overall standards, as well as any additional conditional use standards for that particular use, in this case, the shoreland stabilization proposal. And the code does have specific standards for that shoreland stabilization proposal. The Plan Commission found that the application in this case failed to meet one of the 4 general standards in the conditional use criteria, that a demand exists for the use at the proposed location. And in addition, the Plan Commission found that the application did not meet the following standards that specifically apply to the shoreland stabilization application, and that included the shoreland stabilization priorities, that there's a critical need to protect property threatened by the erosion hazard, the long-term or recurring costs to the public are avoided, and that the proposed structure is the minimum necessary to provide the level of protection required. And in the rest of the staff report, we kind of go through those criteria and explain the Plan Commission's findings as well as the applicant's response to those findings. So I can answer any questions, and Attorney Kbeisman is also here as well.
Anyone have any questions?
I guess I would ask Bill at this point, burden of proof. Is preponderance of the evidence the standard here?
It is a standard of evidence. It is a standard of preponderance of the evidence, which means, is it more likely or not that the criterion has been met?
Is the appellant required to provide proof that less invasive options cannot work?
Yes, so in Oregon land use, the applicant of for a proposal always carries the burden of proof. And so they have to show that they meet the criteria, that it's more likely than not that they meet that criteria. You know, it gets a little confusing when you start using negative criteria, that there are no higher priority options, but ultimately they're the ones who have to show that any particular criterion has been met.
Thank you, Bill.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, so I'm going to call for public testimony and state the request will be reviewed against the criteria of Municipal Code Chapter 17.80, conditional uses. Consistent with Cannon Beach Municipal Code 178860B2, the hearing will be held on the record developed before the planning commission, except that the council will allow photographs from any party showing the condition of the property. Oral testaments will be limited as specified by the council below. Statements may be accepted in writing or orally at the hearing. Oral testimony is limited to 10 minutes for appellants, 2 minutes for proponents and opponents, 10 minutes for proponents and opponents if representing a group of 5 or more people, and then 2 minutes for rebuttal by the applicant. Everybody understand that? 10's the magic number. Some of you and 2 for the others. The pertinent criteria to be considered are identified in the staff report, which was made available to the public 7 days in advance of this hearing. Staff has analyzed the appeal issues relying on the reasoning set forth in the Planning Commission's decision. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the mayor, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, and identify whom they represent. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or with reference to record evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issues precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in the circuit court. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
There is.
Okay.
No one. Someone wanted to.
And Aaron.
I can do that for you if you want.
Okay.
Steve also.
Oh, I missed it. No one wanted to say anything.
Copies for
Next,
you guys.
Very first thing is their presentation.
and then people get a chance. Okay.
Just let me get this.
Burn our 10 minutes.
Burn time, yeah.
Yep.
Giving me share.
You should do it.
What's this?
This is the applicant submitting some stuff that I'm sure will go through.
New stuff?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's not.
Huh?
It's from old stuff.
Sure.
Send to Bill.
All right, Mayor, we're ready if you're ready.
Are you ready for your 10 minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
So Will Rasmussen from Miller Nash on behalf of applicant parties. We're gonna start off with a brief statement from one
Hi,
of the applicants.
I'm Mimi Siegel, 9515 Southeast 15th Street, Bellevue, Washington, 98004. And how I wish I were giving you our Cannon Beach address as the address that I'm presenting tonight. But we can't move forward. We can't move down here. We can't retire here until our home is safe. Marty and I sincerely thank the city council and your staff and our wonderful neighbors and supporters who have come out, an unparalleled team of experts as well. And Adam will be online for you. And we also want to thank our opponents because they share our deep concern for the health of the beach. The council had requested that we save you time at this session. And so I put together a pack that just lists the proponents, folks that have come out. I didn't want to pack the room. And so it's a Cliff's Notes, if you will, to refresh what folks have said in the past. And naturally, I've highlighted what I most want you to focus on. The other comment from this is that I just did the math. And our little 50 feet of waterfront makes up 5/10,000% That's 5/10,000% of the littoral cell of Cannon Beach. If we put a vegetative riprap in there, it is going to have absolutely no effect on the health of this beach. You can call it de minimis, you can call it insignificant, you can call it infinitesimal. It's not going to have an effect, but it's the most enormous effect to our well-being and our little stretch of the beach and erosion. I wasn't sure how to reference one conversation, but you'll recall Troy Thorson mentioning that when he called his supporter to estimate, his supplier to estimate the materials to go into a burrito, the fellow laughed out loud at the absurdity. There's absolutely no chance of the materials that anybody's describing in a vegetative burrito standing up to the task of holding back erosion and holding back the Pacific Ocean. And in fact, what I want to remind you is that there's not a single respected authority who claims that a vegetated burrito or a similar installation will work at our site. And that's why we come to you appealing and asking for the right to install vegetated riprap revetment. Our request to you is more than urgent. A storm event could suddenly take out 15 feet of frontage. Last week, we understand that the storms eroded a little bit more of our bluff. And you've seen photos of how close the waves come and how close the debris comes to our house. So in sum, we sit here tonight, Marty and I, at the mercy of the Pacific Ocean. And frankly, we're at the mercy of your good judgment and your concern for our safety. Thank you.
I'm going to try to be brief and largely just respond to the comments that came in to the council over this response time that the council added. Before I do that, though, I just want to touch on the planning commission decision. It was not an easy decision for the planning commission. It was not close. It was a 4-3 decision. The tiebreaker vote didn't come till the 7th vote, and it was frankly painful for me as the applicant's attorney. Commissioners Bates, Orloff, and Ostrander all voted to approve this. Most or all of you are familiar with your planning commission and how tough they are, how exacting they are on applicants. Commissioner Bates does not vote to approve things lightly. This is a very tough decision. In comparison, the Stephanie application, which has been cited by opponents, was a 7-0 denial at the planning commission. And the primary reason I think of the difference is there is excellent expert testimony in the record on this. And that's by design. The code demands it, that for this type of application, you get a geotechnical engineer to file a report to give to the city. That's for good reason. This is a life safety issue. These are trained engineers, trained geologists. The team that we have with us, and Adam Reese is online, by the way, certified engineering geologist. If the council has any questions from our expert, I want to make that clear that it's still available to you. This isn't an issue of a aesthetic impact of a setback. This isn't a question of, is this house at risk of being destroyed? And the only experts in the record found that that is yes. Some of the comments that came in suggested that we didn't take a close look at whether vegetated burritos could look at the site. That's somewhat, that's surprising to me that folks say that. The first 2 attachments I gave you are just copies that are in the record, but I just wanted to show you so that you have the physical right in front of you. The first is an alternatives analysis memo from Earth Engineers. It runs through every type of shoreline protective structure concept that exists in Oregon's concept of protecting shores. Revetments, vegetated burritos, clay burritos, berms, planting vegetations, putting sand there, scraping. They're all addressed in there. Right behind it is an enhanced review we did in response to questions to the Planning Commission on the sand burrito structures in town. and runs through where those exist, why they're different, and why they don't work here. In short, there's only one set of experts, an engineering geologist and a certified geologic engineer that have assessed this site, look at its conditions, the slope, the soil types, how the waves are hitting it, how the bluff is getting blown over with waves. And they conclude, quote, "The sand burrito structures are not suitable for this property due to their inability to withstand high wave energy conditions, prevent bluff undercutting, and address site-specific erosion challenges." We don't stop there, though. Burrito type erosion control measures are addressed in the state's guidebook for erosion control practices. And it says, quote, "Those are only suited for areas with mild to moderate erosion." The uncontested evidence in the record is that this is a high erosion site. Our experts found that, the state's mapping sounds that. Nobody has said this is a low erosion site, and it's clear why. This is the state's map from Dogami of coastal erosion hazards. You can see the bluff is in the red zone. That's very high. That's 2 zones above moderate, which is where vegetated burritos work under the state's own standards. Opponents cite, at the council, they've cited 2 primary sites they say are analogous of clay burritos. This is one of them. You can see at the base of this, it's not a clay burrito. It looks like a revetment. There's angular basalt rock and cobble rock. That is an extremely different condition than at the subject site. Also, there's no oversteepened slope, no vertical slope. There's no vegetation on the lower portion of the slope. And the geotextile fabric is not functioning. The second site, this is the second site they cite, is a working clay burrito site. Again, you can see angular basalt is at the bottom of this. It wasn't permitted that way, but it's there. That's an extremely different condition, 9-day different condition. What exists at the Poor Seagull site, where there's an undersized bluff, undercut, it's vertical, it's more than vertical at points, and it's collapsing into the ocean. Just to make it painfully clear, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 conditions that are indicative of whether a clay burrito or vegetated burrito might work. The second column is the Seagull's home, what condition exists there. Then the 2 examples come after it and the record citations related to each of these findings. Hey, high energy waves are present at the Seagull site, yes. They're less high at the 2 example burrito sites. There's the vertical bluff, there's the FEMA hazard. Those 2 sites couldn't be more different than the subject site. And frankly, the experts did the homework. This little chart gives you the exact sites to the materials in the record that discuss each of these individual sites and why they don't work. The comments that came into the council avoided the most analogous burrito example in the record. It's just a half a mile north of the Seagull home, constructed in 2021, repaired in 24, and it's not functioning. And Earth Engineers explains why it's not functioning. The toe of the slope is getting eaten away by the ocean. As you can see, the fabric can't hold up to the wave energy at this location, and it's getting oversteepened. I won't play this video for you again, but I just hope you remember those logs that we all see on the beach sloshing around, becoming battering ramps when the tide gets high at these high energy sites. They similarly found the experts, qualified experts, similarly found critical demand and need to protect the Seagull home. FEMA maps show it's one of just a handful of properties in the city that has a structure in the high hazard moderate wave boundary. That's where FEMA says historic significant damage happens. The geotechnical engineer and engineering geologist in the record similarly assessed the specific site, and both concluded that a revetment is needed for the very low elevation of it, the high energy waves, and the vertical bluff, and all the things we've talked about. This is FEMA's map. This is not my map. I did not take a marker to this. That little blurb that sticks out with the handful of properties that are in this high hazard area, it's the Seagull's property and the 2 to the north. The Seagull's home is the only one that has the Limar line going through their home. These pictures speak for themselves. I mean, that's the Seagull's home. That's waves, 8 feet from the edge of the home. You think of those, you think of the bluff eroding further. One storm, the bluff could erode 15 feet, as shown in the record. Those waves are crashing into their home, and as earth engineers said, quote, permanent shoreline protection is needed. Without it, there's an increased risk that flooding will cause structural damage, i.e. settlement caused by saturated subgrade. That's just the soils getting soaked by the waves going by the home, causing it to settle and breaking the home. It's their home. They sleep with their family and keep their prized possessions. There's this issue of Councillor Ostrander. I will just say definitively, Councillor Ostrander can come back and cast a tie vote. The third document I put in front of you with highlighting is the most analogous case in Oregon, Eastgate Theater versus Washington County. And that was a land use appeal of 2 elected commissioners that recused themselves because they had been involved in lower community planning bodies. They did that because they were concerned about conflict of interest and bias. The court concluded, quote, that the refusal of the 2 commissioners to vote was solely a result of a misinterpretation of law, i.e. they could vote, and the Court of Appeals remanded it back to make a new decision. I see Bill Kabisman's online. If you think I'm lying to you, I ask you to squarely ask. If you ask him, if you end up in a 2-2 tie, can Commissioner Ostrander review the record and vote? I'd be surprised if he says no. But Bill does surprise me sometimes. So, lastly, just please, Mimi and Marty are real people. This is really their home. They didn't rush to do a revetment. They tried vegetated berms. They tried cobble berms. They've had this home for decades, and the waves got close enough that they got scared and they called experts. And the geologists and the engineers said, you've got a good reason to be scared. Your home could really get hurt. I just beg you to not substitute your judgment for the experts. When you're renovating your city hall, you hired several engineers and geologists talking about coil drilling and all that fun stuff. And I suspect you listen to them because you believe they know what they're doing. Earth Engineers knows what they're doing. Thank you. And again, Earth Engineers is online if any counselor has any question from a real qualified person.
Okay, thank you. Well, are there presentations by other proponents, those who support this appeal?
Presentation or comment?
Either.
When do we get to ask him questions?
Good
Good
evening.
evening, counselors. My name is Jason Lay, PO Box 161. I live 1 block east of the Siegels property. My wife and I and our golden retriever walk down past their home, down those steps twice a day. And so we're very familiar with this property. Actually just tuned in to the council meeting by chance last month and saw pictures of the stairs we access the beach. And so only just became familiar with the situation. But it did encourage me to review the packets, the findings and the letters that were posted online. And I just met the Siegels yesterday, actually for the first time. So I just chose to come today and make a statement from 3 perspectives. One, as a neighbor, as someone who sees that site daily, I see the erosion. It's visibly noticeable. Even in the past week, I feel like I can see the sand is going back further. It has dished in at the base, and it's noticeable. I've seen them go through putting things in and just watching it get washed away within less than a year. And it seems irresponsible to me to see an impending need that's coming and to put it off until it is worse. That's not something that a responsible person would do, or wait for it to be more urgent. Secondly, I spent 25 years as a civil engineer for the United States Air Force. And so my perspective as an engineer is you see riprap going several hundred yards to the south and several hundred yards to the north. There's just a small section where there isn't riprap. This is also identified as one of the lowest access beach points in Cannon Beach, which means it has a lower berm buffer between the homes and the ocean. So therefore, to me, it makes sense that it has a higher need for protection just because it is lower. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution. What might work a mile north may not be appropriate for this situation, and I think it does take some specific consideration. There is high wave action there, it's been addressed. And I do agree, there was a lot of discussion last month that overtopping of the berm won't be prevented by riprap, but because the overtopping is present and happens multiple times throughout the year, it's that much less likely that a vegetative burrito or something is going to be able to take root because it gets washed out within one season. And so I think that requires a different need and solution. The cobbles get washed away, the burritos get exposed like you see in the pictures, and they litter the beach with that plastic. It really seems like an impractical solution. Thirdly, just as a Cannon Beach citizen, I look at the Planning Commission's findings and the two criteria that they identified that the Seagulls failed to meet. I disagree with. One, the critical need. Again, I go back to, they acknowledge the erosion. They say that it's going to take a longer period of time. But when you see a train coming, you don't wait to get off the tracks. When the tsunami's on its way, we don't wait to blow the siren. And so I think they see a need and they're trying to be responsible about it. I don't think it's fair to say, it's a demand, yes, but is it a critical need? And I feel like the Planning Commission diminished the testimony of knowledgeable experts who proposed what will and won't work. And lastly, the second criteria that they said they failed to meet was the loss of the public access to the beach and taking away from the public use. And I use this access multiple times a day. And I would argue that any loss to the public would be negligible or unmeasurable if they were to put in riprap there. There's a concern about egress going up the riprap to get off the beach, causing a hazard, but there's stairs right there. So there would be no impact on egress. And the argument that the sand goes, this is the very end, that the sand goes away. The sand is higher where there's riprap. Right now, this is a lower part of the beach from the sand. So I just would argue that the riprap does not cause the sand to go away. For all these reasons, as a neighbor, an engineer, and a citizen, I ask that you grant the Seagulls appeal and overturn the denial of the Planning Commission. Thank you. Sorry for going.
Okay. 2 minutes goes by fast. Are there other presentations by proponents?
I'm Lori James, and my address is P.O. Box 216, Talavera Park. And I am right next door to Marty and Mimi, who are amazing neighbors. And in the 60s, my family bought the land that my grandparents built a house on. And so I came here as a child for years and have been coming ever since. And now I'm full-time in my grandparents' house right next door to them. And when I was a child, I saw the berm was, my grandparents actually had my grandpa built a stairway all the way down from where we were to the beach. And now there's no place to put one. It would go way out into the sand. It's just in the green that was there. And he had to take it up every winter. It was made out of wood, little posts or whatever, so you could take it out because it got ruined by the logs that hit everything. And now the logs there's more logs than when I was a kid. They're bigger, they're like giant tree trunks. Right now we have like 3 huge, they look like redwood tree trunks right in the sand in front of us. And, whenever the king tides come, I see them come up and hit that, and you can see the sand being more exposed. And we have a big black drain pipe between our properties. And it used to just have, barely could see it. You'd have to dig for it. And now it's just, 6 feet right out into the sand. So it's scary. I mean, and our property is low, theirs is the lowest, it's even lower than ours. And it's scary to think that, the logs can just roll up and, make everything fall down and the sand goes away and then the water's gonna come up. And like they said, the overtopping, yeah, we see that all the time. But isn't gonna ruin, I can't remember what you said, Jason, but something so cool about how that doesn't make a difference on the rocks. But it's just, it's really scary. The dirt is eroding, all of that, and we have stuff planted there, but all the roots are coming out. So, it's just scary. We don't know what to do. And I remember my kids and my dad, talking about how over the years, how, the tides and the logs, which are even more and bigger now, are taking that away. So it's, it's a scary thing. This is somewhere where I want to retire too. And that's what they're trying to do. And anyway, I appreciate you listening, and I'm not that great of a speaker. So thanks for putting up with me. And I'm sure my 2 minutes is over. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. You did a very nice job.
You did fine.
Other presentations?
It's Alan Cantor, P.O. Box 1392, Cannon Beach. So I've been following this since the first planning commission meeting. And I just want to touch on some things that the main opponents of this have said, which in the first planning meeting at about 2:08 and 30 seconds, the main representative from the opponent group talks about a planned retreat for the Oregon coast, something the state of Oregon does not want to talk about, or something to that effect, kind of insinuating that that is the eventuality that we should need to be coming to. It's clear to me when somebody has that perspective that we should be relinquishing our coastline and getting rid of the structures here, that that's not a perspective of compromise, and that's not a perspective that's grounded in the reality of what this town is about. This is not Wash Ashore Beach like up in Washington. We are spending lots of money on infrastructure into this town to protect and preserve this beautiful community. I think everybody here can agree with the sentiment of the environmental groups that absolutely love the ocean. None of us would live here if we didn't love the ocean, but it's kind of an extreme perspective that doesn't allow for some compromise. And I think the idea of a planned retreat along housing on the Oregon coast is something you should really consider when listening to the perspective of the opponents. There has been a lot of proponents supporting this project, more than opponents. And the main opponents are essentially environmental groups. I'm an environmentalist myself that have one perspective, and that perspective is no. Pretty much what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Other proponents in the audience? Is there anyone online that would like to speak? If you'd raise your hand. Karen?
Hi,
Hi, Sharon.
Sharon Clyde, Post Office Box 973, Cannon Beach. I think that since we allow houses being built on the shoreline or oceanfront, that we should also help when they're having problems with the environment, the ocean, whatever, that, we can't just let them build their houses and then say, oh, too bad, the ocean's going to swallow it up. When there's a decent fix. And I just think that they've tried other things. The Sinclairs have tried other remedies that the ocean has taken away. And I think that that if we were in their place, we would certainly hope that you would allow them to do the riprap. That's what I've got to say, I guess. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else Line? Anybody else in the audience? Okay, are there presentations by opponents? Okay.
Hello, my name is Kaya Hazard, 80198, Highway 202, Seaside, Oregon, 97138. So I'm here on behalf of the Surfrider Foundation and our members who.
Speak up.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, because we had people online who were talking this morning that they can't hear unless people speak up.
Okay. I'm here on behalf of the Surfrider Foundation and our many members who live, work, recreate in, and love Cannon Beach and would love to see it protected for future generations of beach lovers. So first of all, thank you for the many, many hours that you have put into reviewing this application and the written comments and hearing testimony at past hearings and tonight. I appreciate that this opportunity exists to voice our concerns about this application, as this is an issue that affects the entire community. I think it's important to highlight and center the purpose of this hearing tonight and the purpose of the testimony that we've submitted. The City Council is meant to determine if the Planning Commission was correct in denying the application, and that's it. Testimony that we've heard around the character of the seagulls is irrelevant. While I'm sure that it's true, it has no bearing on this situation. The application must meet Cannon Beach's land use criteria, and that has simply not happened. The Planning Commission did not think that the burden had been met, and accordingly, this application has already been denied once. And now, instead of fixing the problem and actually considering alternatives or changing the design, they're continuing to throw money at the problem. And that's why we are here again. So I hope that you all have had the opportunity to read our previous two comments submitted by Surfrider and Oregon Shores. In those, we have highlighted exactly why the applicant failed to meet the city's code, reasons which the Planning Commission also identified. The applicant has not demonstrated that long-term costs to the public will be avoided. In fact, we know that with the placement of riprap, it cannot be. It is an indisputable fact that riprap erodes the beach, even if it is just a small percentage of the littoral cell or of the entire Oregon coastline. It has a domino effect, and each placement of riprap destroys the beach. We can look at beaches like Salishan and Glen Eden for a very grim timeline of just how long it takes for a walkable beach to completely disappear. Additionally, the applicant has not established that there are no less harmful alternatives and that riprap is the minimum necessary for protection. The Planning Commission has already correctly determined that the applicant has not met these criteria. And I think it's important to point out that the commission is quite experienced in reviewing applications like this, being the first point of contact. Therefore, extreme care should be taken when considering the decision to overturn the Planning Commission, and I urge you to uphold that denial. During this very long process, over and over again, we have seen that facts are being willfully misrepresented by Mr. Rasmussen. He has claimed repeatedly that riprap would prevent overtopping, but this has been directly contradicted by his own engineer, Mr. Reese. We have not seen any photos of actual flooding on their property, but rather on the stairs and the adjacent road. And there seems to be this disconnect, whether it is blatant manipulation or simply a lack of education about the actual purpose and essentially the impact of riprap on the beach. Last month, at the last hearing, Mr. Rasmussen has inexplicably held up an arborist who does not work on the ocean shore and never made a site visit as an expert on coastal erosion. They have not brought in anybody who has expertise in nature-based solutions to explain why that won't work. They're saying that their expert says that burritos would work, or would, that no expert says burritos would work, but they have not brought in an expert that works on things outside of that. So meanwhile, after bringing in the arborist, they've sought to belittle and discount the science that highlights the negative impacts of riprap that have been presented by the opposition, including scientists and professionals in this field. Ironically, those cited in the guidebook on erosion control, published by the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and even the authors of the statewide land use goal 18 themselves. Additionally, in the arguments we heard last month, that for the simple fact of other beachfront second homeowners having riprap, the seagulls should get to have it too. And that is just not how it works. That does not have any bearing on this particular application. And it's an unfortunate fact that because their neighbors have riprap to the beach, they are now being affected. But it just goes to show that riprap does not exist in a vacuum. We must look at the big picture here, and we must always do the best that we can with the information that we have. Our incredible public resource, our beach, will be affected, and that consideration for the beach and for the community is reflected in the city code. I agree that it's not a one size fits all, and yet we see riprap placed on the beach as a one size fits all solution. So what we need to do, we need to meet in the middle. Their first attempt at stabilization, dumping cobble there, is not an engineered solution like the ones that Surfrider advocates for. It didn't really do anything. However, there is a middle ground before we get to riprap. And maybe that means we need to get inventive. Maybe it's not the clay burritos, but that's why Surfrider works with folks to find actual solutions. That's why we're working on one such project right here in Cannon Beach at Ecola Creek. We don't want to hang people out to dry. We want to move toward a more just management of our coastline. And each person, each property can be a part of that solution. So while it may not be framed that way by the appellant, that really is in the best interest of everyone, including the seagulls, so that they and their kids and their grandkids can have a beach to enjoy in the future. I think it's also ironic that Washaway Beach was brought up. They have a number of community-led kind of experimental shoreline stabilization projects there, many of which are nature-based, and they've seen really great results from that. They are actually accreting sand in some areas. So it just goes to show that those things do work. The facts of the matter are that riprap damages the beach in an extreme way to the detriment of us all. The application has just not met the city's land use criteria, and the Planning Commission has already determined that denying this application and upholding the Planning Commission's decision would in fact be applying the law fairly and correctly. And I urge you to do so. So thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Are there other presentations by opponents?
Hi.
Just a sec. Are you okay?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. I was gonna have to reach out.
Hi, Diana Turner, PO Box 211, Cannon Beach. I have the pleasure tonight to speak to you on behalf of the Friends of the Dunes, Cannon Beach. We are, as you know, a group of concerned and reasonable community members. We understand and accept and support a property owner's desire to protect the real estate investment. That's why we did not oppose their previous attempts at erosion control. We're not saying nothing on our beach. We have no plans to chain ourselves to the dunes. We are not extremists. We are saying we can't reasonably go from their previous nothing burger attempts at stopping erosion to a large riprap wall. Luckily for all of us, including the Seagulls and their oceanfront homeowner neighbors, our code doesn't allow this either. It demands a measured approach of trying higher priority, less destructive protection measures. I'd like to address a few of the things that you've heard from the proponents tonight. So Mimi, Mrs. Siegel, referenced how her small lot really would have no effect on the greater ocean shore. This is how we've reached where we are in Tolovana. It is the result of our permitting process. The only time that the city is thinking about the management of our shoreline is when an individual oceanfront property owner comes before them asking for a conditional use permit. It's a very small window that they're looking through to make a decision on this one property. And they hear what you did. There is a sophisticated attorney. There are experts who generate a nice looking, thick report saying this is what we need to do. And it's just this property. It's just this one property. It's not going to matter. Cumulatively, we see now it matters. As people have said, look in either direction. It's all riprap, and that matters. It destroys the beach. There is no question of that. Okay, so Troy Thorson, his whole testimony on our last meeting was not on the record. So you can't include it in your deliberation, but I will add that what he could have spoken about was that he was listed as the operator for the 3276 Pacific Street burrito that was constructed 22 years ago. So when the Seagulls asked him to speak, he conveniently forgot that he created one of 3, 4 successful burritos that we have on our beach. Mr. Rasmussen spoke to the vote at the Planning Commission being closed. Yes, 3 people voted to approve this. Mr. Bates said that he believed that we were losing the beach. And he referenced that in the south, there is erosion. And so his concern was, let's try to protect, if we're gonna lose the beach, let's protect a house. Let's protect some houses. Well, the erosion is occurring in the south and it will occur elsewhere. These things happen in cycles, usually about 20 years. It doesn't mean that we're going to lose our beach and we have to, make extraordinary measures to protect a house. Commissioners Ostrander and Orlov found the fact that it was a low-lying lot very provocative. We disagree. Yes, I understand that it's low-lying. I would remind you that this low-lying lot has only a 5% erosion rate per decade. And that is with no protection. Some European beach grass that was planted over 20 years ago, and then they threw some cobble, 50 cubic yards of a combination of cobble, sand, and dirt on the toe of this slope. If a person were going to strategize about how to get a riprap approval, to do something, to say we tried, we did a lower measure, we gave it a shot, we're good soldiers, this is what they would do. A little something that's guaranteed to fail, to say, we tried, now we get the big guns, we get the riprap. Also, these folks knew that they had a low-lying lot when they chose to do their big remodel. Mr. Morgan, again, off the record, spoke about that and how the house was designed to accept water underneath it. And why at that time did they not approve, try to get riprap? Because it probably would have been approved then. People were still reeling from the big storms of 98 and felt as though, you know, gosh, they're telling me El Nino, El Nina, we're in trouble. Lock it down. That's also how we ended up. Now we know with the dissertation we provided to you that was only finished within the year, that El Nino and El Nina do not cause the significant erosion that was expected every time. Okay, next thing that was brought up was the burritos. I feel like I've covered this a lot, but you will see in the summary of findings that it's not up to us to say, this is what will work, and we have an expert. It's up to them to say, nothing else will work. Only riprap will work. So to point at different structures at different places and point out, oh gosh, this one, isn't even a clay burrito. Well, I've given you on the 3rd the permits that showed you it was. And to say that, oh gosh, at this spot, they actually didn't need any erosion protection. Well, they thought they did. That's why they spent the money and did it, right? So we deserve better. Goal 18 requires more, and so does our existing code. You need to be deeply convinced. You need to know without a doubt that nothing else will work. They have not done that. They have not carried that burden of proof. Okay, experts. We heard a lot about that. I will also mention that Les Sinclair, an engineer, also said at the Planning Commission, you haven't tried an engineered burrito. And until you try it, how do you know it won't work? That's kind of the crux of this. Until you try it, how do you know? You'll also remember that Tyler Blanchett of OPRD, in his letter, said you're going to need to really prove this because I'm not seeing significant erosion at this spot. So when they reference the guidebook and say, oh gosh, burritos, it says right here in this guidebook, it'll only work in moderate and mild erosion spots. Well, the OPRD permitting specialist says, I see mild erosion. Okay, so I would like to focus, I'd like to give you some numbers. And I believe that these numbers take this very wide and sprawling conversation that we've had throughout this application and distills it down to the critical elements that I believe caused the majority of the Planning Commission to deny this application. Okay, here we go. 5. That's the number of hours the Planning Commission considered their application. 1.5. That's the number that the Planning Commission spoke directly to their expert, Mr. Reese, asking him questions, asking for clarification, and telling him where they felt their presentation fell short, giving them every opportunity to bring back more expert testimony. And what they brought back was a letter written by their coworker and by his boss. And remember, it's a firm that has no experience in producing anything nature-based. They're the riprap firm. So if you say you need to write, you need to write a technical manual for your company, hire a technical writer, not a poet, you know? They got the right guy for the job that they wanted for riprap. They don't have the right guy to tell them if these other measures will work. He told you, I don't know plants. I don't know, this isn't what I know. He would have had to have known that to be able to evaluate a vegetative solution, a nature-based solution. And he told you several times, I do not have that expertise. So 5%, that's the rate of erosion per decade for this low-lying lot. Remember, that's the average for this part of the county, and that's with no negligible erosion control measures. 5, that's how many decades, or we could say 50 years before the erosion at this rate would be a problem for this short-term rental. 4, that's the number of lots that are protected by burritos. 3 of them for over 20 years. You cannot brush that away, though they have tried and tried. The Planning Commission gave their application an exhaustive review. The applicant tried and failed to prove a critical need for riprap exists at this time in this application. The Planning Commission applied our existing code correctly. We ask that you uphold their decision by denying this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Other presentations by opponents? In the audience? Online?
You got Cameron, she.
Yeah, go ahead, Cameron.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. You guys have a online system that actually works.
Don't hex it now, come on.
I won't take all 10 minutes that I would be allowed probably, but my name is Cameron LaFollette. I'm Executive Director of Oregon Coast Alliance, PO Box 857, Astoria, 97103. And we provided a letter to the Planning Commission in this matter, which should now, after the city's mistake has been rectified concerning the record, be in the record and be available to council members. I don't want to repeat what others have said or read the whole testimony. You can do that yourself. But I would note especially that, which everybody knows, but I think it bears repeating, Goal 18, the purpose of Goal 18 is to protect the beach and to provide a framework by which we can protect the beaches and allow landowners who have significant problems to bring their problems to local governments and see what the best solution is for them, but also for the beach. The beach is not not an invisible party that we just don't really think about if we have some other problem. The beach is an essential party to the whole process, and its protection is an essential aspect for Goal 18. If we're not going to protect the beach and care about protecting the beach, we don't need Goal 18. We could just as well do without it. It is important, we think, to mention that it's been mentioned several times that the Seagulls did various amounts of cobble or berms or doing something or another that was not riprap, but also not a fully permitted cobble berm. And I just want to reiterate that the applicant's own engineer admitted in their January 30th, 2024 report on page 26, it should be noted the 50 yards of cobble previously imported to site is not considered a properly constructed cobble berm. So that isn't something that we are saying or that the other opponents are saying, but that the applicant themselves have been saying. There have been several permits granted for as part of this unengineered effort to do something. But none of those permits have actually been for an engineered cobble berm or any other kind of berm. The Oregon Parks and Recreation Department had permit number 186 which was issued in May 24th, 2022, which was not for the berm, but to operate a motor vehicle on the ocean shore to place up to 50 cubic yards of cobble. It was a permit to operate a motor vehicle, not a permit to build a berm. OPRD had a permit waiver to repair a non-structural shoreline stabilization project because it was less than 50 cubic yards of material, issued March 17th, 2023. Again, not a permit for building an engineered cobble berm. And then finally, OPRD had permit number 451 to operate a motor vehicle on the ocean shore, again, to perform work above on the waiver issued in 2023. So again, it was only a permit to operate a motor vehicle. So none of the 3 permits coming from the state had anything to do with an engineered cobble berm. We could, if everybody were sitting down as a group, a team, trying to figure out how to help the seagulls to the extent that they need help and to protect the ocean shore, which everybody has indicated they care about, come up with solutions that work. I thought it was particularly interesting that it has been, Washaway Beach up in Washington has been mentioned, as Surfrider also mentioned, which has been finally protected by a large contingent of natural solution opportunities and items put together. We would say, Orca would say, we propose that the proponents and the opponents and engineers who truly understand how to engineer a natural solutions berm work together to do something that will provide some of the protection that the seagulls have indicated they need, but also and especially protect the beach in ways that Goal 18 requires. The beach is an essential party to this project. It is an essential party to every project. That's why we have Goal 18. As I said before, the conclusory statements made by the applicant are insufficient. That doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't get us where we need to go. So in an effort to diffuse the situation and hopefully reach a solution that will actually work, as other areas in Cannon Beach have already done, we would propose having a, whether you want to call it a task force or a working group, where the parties can come together with the same goal in mind, to protect the beach, which is why we are all here under this framework of laws, and to work with homeowners who have worries about their property. So I will leave it there, only requesting that the city uphold the Planning Commission's denial, which was the appropriate denial, finding that the applicant had not met the burden of proof that they are required under the law to meet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other opponents on Zoom? If you'd raise your hand. Anyone else in the audience? Okay. Are there presentations by persons who are neither proponents or opponents? This is a new line in our script. Okay, is there a staff response?
No.
Does the applicant wish to offer any rebuttal?
Yes, please. Robert, could I share again? Oh, great. All right. Thank you, Mayor Knopp and councilors. A majority of the recent comments that have come into the record, the ones coming up to X, and a number of the comments tonight are just focused on opposing riprap, not wanting it because it can damage the beach. And I have no qualms with that comment. It's just not relevant for this application. The law, a balance was struck under Goal 18. Revetments are generally banned in most places in Oregon, over 85% of the coast. They're just banned by that law. In a few limited situations, they're allowed. There might not be a site in Cannon Beach that is more appropriate for a revetment than the Seagulls home because of its low elevation, because of its high erosion impacts, because of its high energy waves, its overly steepened bluff, and waves coming within of their home. If this council is going to read its code to allow this anywhere, I think a case can be made and has been made that this is the location. Couple other points. One of the opponent groups raised the fact that Earth Engineers hasn't done a clay burrito, so they haven't done a vegetated solution, so they shouldn't be considered. But at the same time, Troy Thorson, who did a clay burrito, one of the two cited in the record, came and testified saying it wouldn't work here. I'm not sure what else can be done. There's so few clay burritos in Oregon that there's just not a lot of experts to testify about them. And the one recent one that we showed this picture of, it's not working, and having that person come say, well, a clay burrito might work here, wouldn't really make much sense. On the several opponents raised this, tried to take out of context an early statement in the record that the historic rate of erosion of the site is 5 feet per decade. I think it was said tonight is 5% per decade. It's taken out of context. It ignores additional statements in those reports, including that rate of erosion is accelerating despite 2 rounds of cobble coming in, that the waves are getting closer and closer to the house, and that one storm can take out 15 feet. If that bluff came up to the house, as was contemplated in that testimony, those waves would be through the back door and out the front door. And that house, under FEMA's standards, would be wrecked with that kind of waves coming through it. I also just personally want to say, it sounded like Surfrider's representative felt like I was disrespectful. I apologize if that was the case. That was certainly not my intent. I appreciate their testimony and was certainly not intending to be disrespectful. It came across that way at any point. I think all of the groups that have spoken bring an important perspective to Oregon, particularly in legislative contexts where we're changing the rules and changing the laws, not this quasi-judicial context where you're stuck being the judge, applying the law you've got in front of you with the facts that are in front of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Remember, we don't allow disrespect in here.
Oh, right. Good point.
Yeah.
Also, I'll just point out, if any counselors have any questions about engineering, Adam Reese is still online from Earth Engineers.
Okay, go ahead and stay up here because I think we have questions.
Yeah, I have, my first question is regarding your premise that Eric Ostrander a tie vote, and I'd like to hear from Bill Kobayasum about that.
Yeah, so I actually am going to disagree with Mr. Rasmussen here. There are a number of things going on and the reasons why. The first, when you look at the Eastgate Theater case, it involved 2 commissioners in Washington County. And what happened in that case is one of the commissioners, and I've got the case pulled up here, and where did that go? One of the commissioners worked and I'm trying to find it. I had it just a minute ago. Essentially, they didn't make a decision. They were, one worked for a community planning organization that studied the proposal, and that community planning organization made a recommendation, and the other one did something similar. The difference here is that Councilor Ostrander actually made a decision, and it'd be like a judge sitting in judgment of his own thing. In addition, the County Board of Commissioners, the way their voting worked was they had a 5-member board of commissioners, and they needed 3 affirmative votes to do anything. So essentially, when those commissioners recused themselves, it made it impossible for a decision to be made overall. And that was something that's cited by the Court of Appeals. When the law requires the affirmative action majority of the entire board, a refusal to vote may result in defeating the proposition. In this case, the Cannon Beach City Council charter, the Cannon Beach Charter says that a council decision is made by a concurrence of a majority of the members voting. So not voting doesn't have the same impact in this case. It just eliminates that person both from the vote as well as the total that they need to reach. So I just don't think the Eastgate Theater case is analogous here. I think there's some other cases that came from LUBA more recently that are more appropriate. So I don't think that Councilor Ostrander can come back in. We've discussed this with Ashley, the city attorney who is responsible for the charter interpretation for you, and she agrees with this position as well. So I don't think Ostrander can come back in.
Bill's, of course, your attorney. I would just say I think you land in the same spot because you get the absurd result of a 2-2. Just ends up with us resubmitting the application so that we can actually have a vote of all the councilors. We go through the same exact steps. We'd clean it up, of course, be a slightly different application. But it sucks a bunch of time and money and resources out of the local jurisdiction and out of the poor applicants. Just to get to the same moment, 9 months and, bunch of people's hours in the future. But appreciate your looking into it, Bill.
Okay, and then I have a question that you can answer, I think. You showed pictures of overtopping or the result of overtopping when there was water flooding. Yes, picture on the left. And it looks, my impression is that the water is coming up that right of way, that path, and then fanning out. And that there was some indication in the record that actually having riprap on the front of the Seagulls property would make that even worse. In fact, it would make for more water coming up that would be deflected off the riprap and come up those stairs, and you'd have even more flooding to the north and to the south on that property, which makes sense to me from a mechanical standpoint. And so it seems that riprap is not going to help that issue at all. And it actually may hurt what's going on there, make it worse. That's how
As the photo is labeled, I actually view that as overtopping coming north and west of the Seagulls home, i.e. coming directly on their property from the ocean to the west. And I don't recall what you are thinking of in the record that is evidence that this would exacerbate.
It wasn't evidence, it was someone's opinion.
Okay.
It makes sense to me from a mechanical standpoint that if you have riprap there, that would deflect the water and it would have even more coming up those stairs. I don't know. I just thought that I don't see how riprap is going to solve that problem at all. And
the testimony from our engineers in the record is that by riprapping there, it keeps that bluff from coming closer and letting those waves come closer with that bluff.
Well, just difference of opinion.
That's the angle absorbs it.
Pardon?
I believe that the engineer adds that the angle of the riprap absorbs.
So having a
and
two
mitigates
a 2-to-1 angle of the slope as opposed to a 90-degree angle.
See, I remember him saying, because I sat through the whole planning commission meeting.
I recall. Appreciate your attention to detail.
And I recall him saying that it really wouldn't solve the problem of overtopping, that overtopping is going to happen anyway.
Mitigates it.
Well,
I'm not saying.
Don't remember him saying that. So anyway, and I would also ask you, why no vegetative burrito has ever been properly engineered and designed and placed on the site?
On our site? Great question. So this, the column on the left has 7 characteristics that relate to whether a vegetative burrito will work. Are there high energy waves that lead to high erosion? On our site, there is, as you'll recall, the DLCD guidebook on erosion control says vegetative burritos are only appropriate at low or moderate erosion sites. Is there a presence of oversteep and vertical rough? That indicates that oversteep and vertical rough indicates that waves are running up and hitting it, which we know happens here because of the overtopping.
Right.
That makes the toe of those vegetated burritos erode quickly when those logs and whatnot hit it. And I won't go through all these, but you get the point.
And I see your chart and it's a nice chart, but I'm just saying, you never tried, it's never been tried. And I'm talking, I said properly engineered, you know, a creative solution, a solution using the resources that are available, like Surfrider, et cetera. Nobody has ever tried that. And why not try it?
The two answers. One, the legal one for this purpose, we don't have to. All we need to do is, as Bill said, show by a preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, that it won't work. And we got all this testimony from the engineers that say it won't work. And then this chart literally with, I forget how many factors of why it won't work. Second, we would, if we thought it would have a chance, we would. The Seagulls have not like been gung ho to get revetment out of the gate. They've owned this home for decades. They tried 2 rounds of cobble berm.
Dumping a bunch of cobble at the base of the.
To the question on that,
I mean,
to that question,
Please forgive me for inserting myself here.
Do you want to, could you come up to the table, please?
just make sure you're on the mic.
Thank you. A solution. It's the city and the state who designed it, recommended it, and we followed it.
And the reason the cobble berm wasn't engineered is you can't have an engineered cobble berm on a 50-foot site. The handful of cobble berms that exist in Oregon are about 1,000 feet long. They're beach wide structures. That's what it says in the DLCD guidebook. So they're a beach. They're not appropriate for individual sites, particularly 50 feet. If we thought there was a chance of it working, we would. Like, there's no reason not to, you know?
We didn't throw something at it to just pass that test. We wanted a good, solid solution. We went to the city and we went to the state and we said, what can we do? And this was their recommendation.
The city and the state made a recommendation that you have.
Signed it. But no, I'm sorry, about the cobbles that we
Of
installed.
what stone to put in and how.
This wasn't some bogus attempt on our part. This was us.
Said it was a bogus
following.
attempt. I just said,
Recommended to us.
okay, I haven't seen.
Thank you for letting me insert
I
myself.
haven't seen anything in the record that says that the city and the state told you to put, I haven't seen that.
It's in our previous testimony.
But I'm talking about something other than,
I think it's in exhibit A2 or A4, either our original narrative or the original geotechnical report.
that the city and the state both said,
That it was put in at the direction of the city and state, yeah.
I don't believe I've seen that. So I mean, I don't want,
I'll go ferret it out
Yeah.
for you, but I'd encourage you to close the record.
but I just, yeah. So I think that, okay, well,
There other questions?
Yes. Most of my questions have to do with our code, but I think it's clear the appellant is required to provide proof that other less invasive options cannot work. And by proof, that's more likely than not to work. I think you've got some evidence there that that less invasive options are less likely to work and are not recommended. But I guess it comes down to the question of what does work mean? And, you know, is slowing erosion enough? It's just that
We had a debate at the planning commission around that issue of what does will it work mean? What does failing mean? Our engineers kind of assess this. This is as close as clay burrito to what we have, and they walk through from an engineering standpoint anyway why it's failing. It's overly steepened. The bags are getting broken open, and when you look at the text and context of the code, I think that's what it means by work. Will it function like a properly designed solution is supposed to function under the norms and standards of that industry?
I guess it's really our decision to decide what works. And I don't know, if I'm wrong, then I would like Bill to correct me, but I think it's kind of like we are deciding what works and what doesn't. Would that be correct, Bill?
Yeah, so you have the code that you have. The applicants have provided evidence to you that they think demonstrates that higher priority methods of erosion control will not work. You have opponents who have presented evidence and testimony that they believe they can work. And so the applicant must show by preponderance of the evidence that higher priority methods will not work. Exactly will not work. What will not work means is that's part of your job to define, to explain and interpret what will not work means.
Thank you. And can we back up just a little bit? I probably asked you this at our last hearing, but can you remind me of the history of the vegetated berms?
Yes, the Seagulls bought this property in the early 2000s, and around 2006 installed 2007 installed a sand berm and planted it.
With willows.
With willows, thank you. One of us has a shockingly good memory, and one of us is.
That was done in 2007?
In 2007, it was planted with willows. That washed out pretty quickly, though, and then the bluff continued to erode towards the house. The waves were getting closer and closer and closer. The owners got more concerned. 2022, and had conversations with OPRD in the city about trying to get some protection. I believe it was suggested to them to try a cobble berm, to try putting cobble out in front of the site. So around 2022, they put cobble with sand and again willows.
Yes.
Again willows over the top. That washed out within one storm season. All of the cobble was gone. All of the plantings were gone. Obviously, if the soils and cobble is all gone, that plantings can't take root.
Sand berm did something for 15 years.
It washed away quickly and erosion continued. And it was just, it was far enough away from the home that it was, the waves that were coming up were far enough away from the home that it didn't become a real priority back until right after the pandemic.
The truth is, we didn't. Can you go ahead and come on up and have a seat? Everyone needs to. Thank you.
We didn't know what else to do. And my husband kept calling Jay. I can't remember his last name. No, from
Jason Awald.
And he would say, I don't have time to come out and talk to you. And then we would try it a few months later and he would say, I don't have time to come out and review you. And so we burned a couple years waiting for him to have time. And then.
This is the OPRD staff member in charge of Ocean Shore.
And then he left his position and they hired a couple other people. 2 people took his position. Does this sound right to you? And then we had to give them time to get acclimated to their position. And then finally, we lost a few years in this, and it was Marty that kept calling because it was his greatest concern. And finally, we kind of pushed it a little bit more, and they said, well, all right, the city is recommending. I don't know, would you have been involved in that?
I wasn't here at that time.
Okay, that you could do this. We'll all let you do this. So it wasn't that the hill was stable, it was that we couldn't get anybody's attention.
So our code requires, I'm sorry.
Just to finish, 2022, it was installed and planted, washed away in a year. Again, 2023,
we repaired it again.
Reinstalled, repaired it. Did you plant it again in 23?
Yeah.
Planted again, washed away in a season again.
So our code requires, and this was rejected on the basis that there is not a critical need. And your response to that is?
these waves keep getting closer to their house. The engineers say without a permanent shoreline protection, there's an increased risk that flooding will cause structural damage, i.e. settlement caused by saturated subgrade, i.e. these waves get close enough to the house, saturates the ground, causes settlement in one location, not the other, and the house starts to break. To me, that's, I mean, if somebody's talking about their house potentially breaking, I think that's critical. But to your point, you know, a preponderance of evidence of what is critical need. There could be more than one opinion on what that means.
There's a letter in here from ORPD. We put it in the file, and it looks like they did come out to discuss the permitting process
Yep.
and noted the limited evidence of erosion or threat to the home observed during the October 2023 on-site meeting. OPRD advised the applicant's agent that it would need to provide adequate justification for the project as provided by rule when they applied for a permit. So
in October of 23, I think Tyler Blanchett probably wrote that letter. He would not have been able to see these waves. He would not have been able to see the waves while lapping by the house.
but that's from overtopping.
Yeah. That's what to me is causing that overtopping, those waves getting closer to their house, the bluff eroding, letting those waves get closer to their house means that house can, engineers call it, have settlement caused by saturated subgrade, structural damage.
But I remember that your engineer was specifically asked, or you were on the record, whether overtopping would be prevented by riprap, and they were said no.
He said overtopping would continue, but by stopping the receding of the bluff, it will not get worse.
He said that it would not stop overtopping.
It won't stop overtopping. It will keep.
So that would still,
closer and worse.
well,
I mean, they're related, I guess is all I'll say.
yeah, I'm not going to argue semantics. So this, you're saying that this letter from OPRD is just incorrect, or?
No, it's correct. He's saying he need evidence. He didn't have the engineering reports that we put in the record. He didn't have the, the 5 letters, I believe, from engineering geologists or geologic engineers that are in the record here.
It says since March.
He didn't have, sorry.
To 2024, limited if any contact with regarding any proposal. So,
Well, if we would have gotten through the city real quick, we'd be talking with OPRD more, but we want to go through this process and do it the right way.
well, I know, but I'm just saying that OPRD at this point didn't seem, at the last, as of this letter, didn't seem to see it as an issue. So I'm just.
I read that letter as entirely neutral, saying what they require under their code.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing and move to consideration.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Mayor Knopf.
Thank you all. Thank you. Anyone like to start?
I just hate these decisions because our code leaves so much discretion. I have concerns that expert reports are disregarded or discounted. It seems like the Seagulls did everything right here as far as trying other options. And our code doesn't really tell us what to do, or that, there's nothing between the vegetative and berm and vegetative riprap. There's not clay burritos in here. And so we end up trying to add a bunch of detail in there where there's no detail. And it's just, it's frustrating too. It's clearly our code is designed to give some kind of path to riprap. It's designed that way. And I just, what does it take to cross that bar becomes the question. And I guess that's maybe my question for, to me, it comes down to, is this a critical need? Which is, I guess, the planning commission's major point on this. So I guess I'm interested in Mayor Knopp, Councillor Hammond, what you think a critical need is in this case. Is it having at the door? What does a critical need look like?
Well, if you read the whole planning commission findings, what they've said is there's not a demand for this project, much less a critical need. The evidence shows that the primary threat this property faces at this time is from wave overtopping of the bluff, and the riprap structure will do nothing to prevent that. As far as erosion, at this time, the edge of the bluff is currently approximately 30 feet from the home, and the current rate of erosion is the same as the average for this portion of the coast, or approximately 5 feet per decade with erosion control methods in place. And then it goes on discussing the critical need issue. And that was just one of several reasons it was denied. That was 1A, but they also went on to 1E, of impact on the public. That was another thing they focused on.
I kind of had a question there too, whether, part of that is scouring sand off the beach, but part of it is any kind of revetment takes some public space away. Does a burrito take less public space away than a riprap revetment?
I can't answer that, but I'm not looking at it from that point of view. I'm looking at it more from what it does over time to erode the beach itself. And that's the part that concerns me. But also the thing that I really am bothered by is the whole idea, 1782-301I, I can't tell which it is, where they talk about first trying less invasive methods. And that's what really has me. And I know that there's a chart that says a less invasive method won't work, and that there is the engineer who is not a coastal engineer saying that, and he's not someone who builds these kind of other solutions other than riprap. So I see it that because the applicant has not attempted a less impactful option, that no vegetative burrito has ever been properly engineered one. And that's what's really important, designed and engineered. Has never.
Isn't the vegetative burrito the planting of riparian vegetation?
No, it's not just planting willows. No. It's.
Where is it in our code? Where is it under 17?
Oh, there was a list of things you should try.
210. These for shoreline stabilization for erosion control are from highest to lowest, proper maintenance, existing riparian vegetation, planting of riparian vegetation, vegetated riprap. That's the order of things that we follow. And it seems like the Seagulls followed planting of vegetarian.
I don't see them.
Riparian vegetation.
They've never tried.
Maybe it's not. Again, you're adding something in there between B and C.
Never tried a less invasive,
They have, they testified to that.
planting willows.
And putting the,
But that's not an engineered solution. That's what I'm saying, is I see that that has to be tried first. And then if that doesn't work, then you move to something much more invasive.
it doesn't say that it has to.
I
be
guess I just wished,
vegetarian.
you know, that
It doesn't.
somewhere between B and
Gary just
C,
read it.
it said an engineered solution, but it doesn't.
And they have tried, and I think that one thing that I'm hearing is, even though, and I understand about protecting our beaches, but their home is at risk. And it's going to keep eating away at the bottom of that. And eventually that's all gonna wash out. That's gonna get saturated underneath. And the more it erodes, the more the overtopping is gonna saturate that ground, and they're gonna lose their home.
Well, I'm reading here from the findings that were made, which are what we're supposed to decide on, whether the finding, you know, whether we agree with these findings or whether we think the planning commission made the right decision. And they say here, hardened structures such as the riprap proposed here, or seawalls or bulkheads, occupy portions of that public beach, and as amply demonstrated in the guidebook and the materials elsewhere in the record, have the potential of significant damage, if not eliminating the public beach as has occurred elsewhere. The applicant has not attempted or fully explored less impactful options, such as vegetative management, clay sand burritos, or dynamic revetments. Without that evidence, the Planning Commission cannot conclude that the proposed riprap structure is the minimum necessary. As the City Council recently found, it may be that those solutions will not work, but uncertainty alone, or the fact that an option may require more maintenance or may be more costly standing alone, is not sufficient to justify the impact on the public beach. That was our finding in a different riprap case. So that, to me, that's what I focus on. I mean, that's what, I mean,
Well, it
as
sounds
well
like
as all the other.
something between B and C that is not in our.
No, I don't think that's true. I think there's a guidebook that has different options. It's somewhere in the record.
It says that they cannot conclude that it would work, that it would work. And there were a lot of maybes in there.
How do you know until you try?
From what, right, but they have taken, it's not that they haven't taken any steps.
But they haven't.
Unfortunately, yeah.
With you. Okay. They haven't taken an engineered, a really significant engineered solution.
That's
And I-
currently what should be between B and C in our code.
But it's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is some kind of engineered less.
Our code has to also,
Solution. Unfortunately, what is there is planting of riparian vegetation, and the next step is vegetated riprap.
but the state guidelines list an order of things, and it goes that the burritos are between up.
Well.
I wish I could
maybe
find
we
that
need to
state
spend some time on
site.
Our code is.
Does our
is
code-
my
does-
point.
Yeah,
Does the city code take precedence over the state code? Probably.
no,
I think we probably should get an official opinion on that.
With regards to that, typically what happens is the state will oftentimes look to see what the city has done. So it's kind of a catch-22. They wait for the city to first act on the proposal, and then a similar hearings process will happen before them, where they'll take the city's information, they'll take the application. If they get, once a shoreline stabilization is approved by the city, then it's required to go to OPRD for their similar approval of that. So oftentimes they take into consideration what the city has done as part of their approval process.
Thank you.
and I guess you could interpret, the least invasive method requirement to apply to different things listed in that are possible, and I don't think that's been done. I would like to say that, I mean, this is a very terrible case have to decide, because I can't think of anybody, we've gotten a lot of testimony from neighbors and friends of the Seagulls. They're clearly terrific people. There's no doubt about that. That is not something we're supposed to take into consideration. The photographs on the beach with grandchildren, I mean, that tugs at my heart. But I have to close my mind to it because I know I'm not allowed to consider those things. And
me too.
yeah. And I think
We can't consider those things. We also can't consider just the way we would like our code to be, or go with our environmental instincts. We would probably all, none of us want riprap. None of us want the beach eroding. But I mean, for me, it's wrapping my head around this code and seeing whether they've met the burden or not.
But read what we wrote, exactly what we said in the last case. And that's, again, the applicant has not attempted or fully explored less impactful options such as vegetative management, clay, sand burritos, or dynamic revetments. And then this is what the planning commission said. Okay, without that evidence, the planning commission cannot conclude that the proposed riprap structure is the minimum necessary. Our code even says it should be the minimum necessary. Now, and then what
Where does it say?
The city council found it may be that those solutions will not work. We said that, but uncertainty alone, or the fact that an option may require more maintenance or be more costly standing alone, is not sufficient to justify the impact on the public beach. We said that in a previous case, and now we're talking about not saying it, which I find odd, to say the least.
I think I'm looking at the code, and this is the old code numbers, 17.6.210, D1 and D2, shoreline stabilization priorities. Is that, it's in the staff report of February 11th. Priorities for shoreline stabilization for erosion control are from highest to lowest, proper maintenance of existing riparian vegetation, A. B, planting of riparian vegetation. C, vegetated riprap, and then goes on to serious, more structural things.
I guess I don't interpret planting of riparian vegetation to mean just putting some willows in. I think, to me, it means
Our code is
a larger,
bad.
well, that's how I interpret the code, that it means something more than just planting willows. That it means some kind of a planned out, engineered.
Vegetation means something more.
Yeah, it means planned out, engineered project. But that includes planting. So, I mean, and I think that they were, that the planning commission was also referencing the guidebook on what the steps are you should take in the state guidebook on ocean shores management, what steps you should take first. And this kind of engineered burrito solution was in that guidebook before riprap. And I think that's what they were referring to, because they refer to the guidebook in their findings. So, and I don't.
Basing their decisions on our code.
No, I think you also have to base the decisions on the overlaying shoreline management by the state as well. The shoreline is managed by the state, not by City of Cannon Beach. So I think that you have to look at their guidebook and what they propose. Unfortunately, I have all these papers here. I can't find it now. Do you have it?
I'm sorry, what was?
A list of priorities in
the state guidebook?
Yeah.
If I have that right in front of me, right offhand.
where they refer to different proposals of different things you can do from lowest to highest priority.
I don't know, maybe Bill can clarify something here. Should these
Right.
decisions be made based on the code, or are we considering these other state sources and?
Yeah, and it's a good question, and part of the issue is the overlapping jurisdictions of the city and the state. Both have interests in shoreline protective structures. But those overlapping interests are aimed at different things, and when the city makes its decision, it is looking at its code. You know, there might be some context you might take from what the state does, but it's really the code that governs what you do. And, you know, the state will take make its decision based on the state regulations and state statutes, but the city looks to its code to determine whether or not the code is met or not.
Right, and the council found that this criterion is similar to the priority scheme in 1780-230D, which is what I think you mentioned, right? And said, but allows for consideration of other options and considerations. So, I mean.
Honestly, I believe we should go to work soon on reworking this code.
Well, yeah, but then they also did base their decision on the code itself. And they, whether, A through F and whether those were met. And they concluded that all of them should be met and that A and E were not met.
So
It's also not fair to homeowners that are following our code and following A, B, C. And then we tell them, no, you didn't do something between B and C.
No, I'm talking now about 1780-230 E, 1 and
Yes.
A and 1E.
Yes, I think.
Also based, that was the first part of their
Talking
decision.
need and then the impact to the beach, yes.
Right, and they found that both A and E were not met.
And I guess A is the critical need point, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's part of our decision too. Is this a critical need or not? It still kind of comes back to, and what does work mean? Is a solution that works for a week working, is a solution that works for a year working? And I don't necessarily have answers to those. I'm interested in what council thinks.
I wish our code was clearer. And I mean, I think it's something we definitely need to work on. And these are tough.
Still have lots of these decisions coming for these to you. So yes, look at that. This is what we got.
And I think there's a lot, it just leaves so much for interpretation. And how would you read it? I mean, I know that, but I know that if it was me, and I don't know if I can have an opinion here or, but
Of course you can.
I would read it exactly like Gary is interpreting it. And you can't have gray area, and there is a lot of gray area. We know this needs to be fixed, but unfortunately, there's gray area, and I feel that.
So do you disagree? I guess I'm asking, do you disagree with the planning commission's findings that 1780-230 E, 1A and 1E found that they were not met? You think they were met?
I don't have that paperwork in front of me. I don't have my laptop.
A is this a critical need?
Yes, I think it's a critical need for them.
And E has to do with, is there a cost public? Is that correct? correct?
Basically, yeah. Long-term or recurring costs to the public are avoided. And they said they didn't believe that was met. Said that they didn't believe that at this point in time that the critical need was, there was no critical need right now. There might be in the future, but right now there's not. And they said the reason that they believe there is not right now is that the bluff is currently approximately 30 feet from, and the current rate of erosion is the same as the average for this portion of the coast, or approximately 5 feet per decade with erosion control methods in place. Given that rate of erosion and the distance between the bluff and the home, the structure will not be threatened by erosion for 5 decades. This is supported by the fact that the previous vegetative embankment, when they put the willows on, survived on site for 15 years. This indicates that less aggressive stabilization option may be effective, and there's not a critical need for proposed vegetated riprap. The applicants appear to be concerned about unpredictable storm events, but the code does not provide for analysis based on worst-case scenarios. In other words, we have a hurricane or something that the code doesn't even provide for that. So actually the Planning Commission focused the bulk of their opinion on those two criteria not being met, A and E. And I know that it's very likely or possible that sometime in the future, it may, if nothing was done, nothing on the site, there would sometime in the future be a critical need. And they're saying that that could be. At this point, there isn't, is what they found. Especially if there's some kind of revetment of some sort put in place. And then the minimum, the second one, long-term or recurring costs to the public are avoided. Well, that's obvious because we all know that riprap, we didn't always.
The reason to deny any.
Yeah, it is. And that's another problem with the code because it was at one time, before we had that lecture from all those people, the Dogami and the Oregon Shores, the Oregon Shores people, the parks, until we had that educational seminar, I had no idea that we had approved riprap after riprap because we didn't know any better. I saw it happen at the Planning Commission level. I never liked it, but I didn't have the knowledge that was provided by this whole scientific seminar. And once I attended that, I was like, oh my goodness, that was dumb, but we didn't know any better. And now we had that educational, that education was provided to us, and there's much more knowledge about the effects of riprap than there used to be. So now we realize that it definitely, and the code was written, obviously the code is out of date. Because if you're going to say long-term or recurring costs to the public, that's definitely not met. I don't see how you can get around that one. But I think that.
But if it is a critical need, then, which according to the Planning Commission isn't now, but it could be in the future. That could be in a year, it could be in 10 years, we don't know. And then they would bypass that and allow vegetation. They would, what was it, 1 or EA or 1 or something for the
yeah, that is a problem with the way it's written.
But they would, but the Planning Commission would bypass that if it was a critical need for them.
I don't know if they
public beach.
And I'll tell you why, because all those criteria are supposed to be met. The way the Planning Commission read it and the way I read it, it doesn't say or. It makes a list. Qualifications for structural shoreline stabilization methods for beachfront protection shall be permitted only if, and they list them. It doesn't say A or B or C. So, it's so.
Clearly says all of them, but if we're going to say long-term or recurring costs to the public are avoided, if we're talking about you know, any chance that there's going to be a change to the beach, erosion, then why do we have the rest of this code? We should just.
Well, I agree with you that the code needs to be updated. I mean, if this is written before, you know,
I think we all agree there.
right, it has to be, it has to happen fast, I think, but, you know, not, you know, just waiting around for months and months and months, but
But long-term
as,
recurring costs to the public are avoided. So, I mean, I'm not a lawyer. Do we have a lawyer here? Long-term or recurring costs.
yeah.
Bill just.
Let's have Bill.
Oh, we do have a lawyer here.
You do have one and, you know,
You're muted,
we,
Bill.
It's weird it's saying he's talking, but it wasn't coming through.
You're not coming through.
well, I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
See the little
Still not.
box
He leans in.
Here.
Yeah.
We can see your mouth moving, but nothing, we can't hear any words.
Do we need to?
Where's
He'll be right, yeah, he'll be
Here.
back.
Yeah.
He's
Hello?
gone.
Is that, can you hear me now?
Our IT guy is using the restroom.
The audio, little mic in the bottom left is jumping.
I thought you had to do it over on the board.
Go ahead, Bill.
He's muted now.
Nope.
Nope.
Oh, we gotta get Rusty back here.
We could just call in, put it on a loudspeaker phone.
Robert,
Give it a second.
yeah, Robert did.
Robert, I mean. I don't
He
think,
did leave.
no,
Oh, okay.
no, he wouldn't leave.
What about now?
Hold that thought.
Yeah, just, we have to just wait till he comes back to help us make this work.
All right.
So he's gonna tell us, talk to us about long-term or recurring costs to the public.
Just in time.
Right. We're trying. It sounded like we had him.
You didn't ask permission to leave.
As soon as he walks out,
Yeah.
everything breaks loose.
Some attendees can hear him.
Bill, it has his speaker muted. You can see it there.
In the corner.
It's something in our
No.
room. Or you know what, I can turn my.
Is it unmuted now? No?
Come out, come back in.
Might have to shut,
Uh-huh.
might have to reboot.
I don't know. We have to reboot. He might have to.
Just left.
Yeah.
He'll probably try to come back in.
Sharon has her hand up. She knows the solution.
Who?
Sharon. I don't think so.
Okay, can you hear me now? Nothing? I'm seeing nothing on your
Does he
end.
have himself muted somehow?
Not hearing it.
No, shoot.
You know, people are hearing you online. It's something with our audio in the room.
Oh, really?
Karen has her hand up.
Yeah, everybody probably knows that we can't.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, they're all saying we can hear them.
Or we can't hear them. That might be what they're saying too. I have no idea.
Be on Zoom.
I think we should reboot.
We don't know.
Well, my concern is if we.
He said
Out of recess, he can.
Gotcha.
On Zoom.
They're saying they can?
Yeah, he can't hear Bill on Zoom.
Can we take a break and I'll call Rusty?
Sure, let's take a break.
Hey, Bill, try saying something.
Hello, can you hear me now? Anything?
No.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And do you remember the question that you were asked?
I remember a question. Hopefully it's the right one, and if not, I'm sure you'll let me know.
Okay.
So as I understand, the question was about the cost, and I'm trying to find it here on my thing. Oh, well. So E1, structures for shoreline stabilization methods for beachfront protection shall be permitted only if the long-term or recurrent costs to the public are avoided. And the question, as I understood it, was what does that mean in terms of costs? And I think there are a variety of different ways that could be interpreted. If you look at the planning commission, what they talked about it fairly broadly, talking about the cost to the public. You heard testimony that structures, shoreline stabilization structures like riprap can lead to oversteeping of the beach. They can lead to a loss of the beach. That is a long-term cost to the public that the planning commission was concerned about. They also talked about the structure itself may be constructed on the beach or would be constructed in the area that the public has access to, and that this may have long-term costs to the city as a whole. I think the applicant would tell you that that the cost in this situation should be construed more narrowly, and that the cost, there's nothing that comes out of the public budget or has impacts that would require additional actions on behalf of the city. And, they lay that out in their arguments in their appeal statement. So again, this is similar to will it work? You've got a broad, somewhat nebulous criterion, and you get to fill in exactly what that means.
But wouldn't applying it strictly just be tantamount to saying no riprap ever?
That's certainly an argument that can be made. There may be situations where maybe these costs that the planning commission was discussing may not have as much of an impact, but as stated by the planning commission, that may well be an argument.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions for Bill?
Just gonna leave them on?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm just going to say that reading everything that read, my feeling is that at this point, I don't think there is a critical need on the property to protect the property. Again, I think there's very likely it may be in the future, but I don't know that if they tried an engineered solution that was less impactful on beach than riprap, it may be that it would be a long time away for it to be a critical need. And I also interpret long-term or recurring costs not to be a monetary thing, but to be a cost to the public good. And I think that is the only way to interpret it. And also, I also think that I read this very strictly, that it shall be the minimum necessary to provide the level of protection required. And by minimum necessary, riprap to me is not minimum necessary. There are other possible solutions that are types of solutions that would include vegetation for sure. But, I think that they are available to the seagulls and that they should try those first. I really firmly believe that. So that's my position.
You want to make a motion?
Okay, yeah, so hold on, I think I might have actually written something down. Okay, I move to uphold the planning commission and deny application 25-01. Does it have to say anything else? I don't say for what reason.
In the script, there's some language.
Okay, I move that the council deny the appeal, tentatively upholding the planning commission's decision and direct the staff to bring back findings based on the council's discussion this evening for consideration by council on March 11th or a special meeting with a date to be determined.
There a second? So I have a point of order question. With 4 people, can I second?
So I actually read the, shoot, what is it called? The rules of procedure earlier today. Because we were curious on that one, and it did say that the presiding officer.
Second. And second, right?
Can second it. I want to find that language to tell you real quick. So the presiding, this is what their code of rules of procedure, and you can agree or, presiding officer present and second motions. While it is preferable that the presiding officer not make or second a motion, nothing in these rules, city code, charter, or state law prohibits the presiding officer from doing so. The presiding officer has the same authority as the other members of the governing body to present or second a motion.
Bill, do you agree with that?
Yes, if that's what your code of procedures allows, then that is acceptable.
Okay, I second the motion. Any further discussion?
I guess I just feel like the Seagulls have followed our code. And I guess there's obviously some discrepancy in what a critical need is and the definition of a solution that works. But I'm just not sure if we're not going to allow it in at this location. That where would we allow it? And maybe those are decisions we need to make, and maybe our code needs to be more restrictive, but
or at least more narrative.
Have something between B and C.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Okay, Councillor Hammond,
No.
Councillor Hayes,
no.
Council President Kerr,
Yes.
Mayor Knopf.
Yes.
All right, so we can talk to Bill, but that would, it's my understanding that a 2-2 vote fails. And so there's no, Bill can answer this, but a 2-2 vote fails, and we might want to listen to him about what other options are. There could be another motion made.
Bill, if you're talking, we can't hear you, so just a sec. Steve, you want to read, did you hear what Steve said? Bill?
He did.
Oh, okay. Making hand gestures?
Can you hear us now?
What Steve said.
Okay, now we can hear you.
Yeah, I not started talking. I wanted to let Steve finish. Yeah, we have a motion that has failed 2-2. The next step, sorry, I'm getting feedback here on my end. The next step would be possibly a motion in the alternative that, to approve the appeal overturning the planning commission. It may well be that it's one of the person on the council could change their mind. So further discussion would be in order, but at the end of the day, if it remains deadlocked at 2-2, the result would be that the appeal fails and the planning commission's decision becomes the decision of the city.
Bill, what the motion was in the form of saying that they were supporting the planning commission and it failed. Correct?
I mean, at the planning commission level?
No,
To uphold the planning commission decision.
yeah, to uphold the decision, and then
To deny the appeal and uphold the planning commission's decision. That was the motion.
Right. Right, but it wasn't an affirmative, like I vote in favor of the, I would make a motion in favor of this, and then it failed. It was, I am supporting a particular direction, and that failed, when that failed,
No.
is there a difference depending on how you ask the question?
This is the language. This is the,
I understand,
I move that the council deny the appeal.
right?
The appeal, okay. And tentatively upholding the planning commission decision and direct staff to bring back, because we need to have findings and to see if we approve those findings.
Understood, but it failed.
So the planning commission stands, but the appeal fails.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
it was an odd way to start.
Okay,
So let's-
let's listen to Bill first.
Well,
Yeah.
can we,
What has happened is a matter's been brought before the council. You know, the matter that has been brought before the council is an appeal asking the council to change the planning commission's decision. For the council to take an action, you've got to have a concurrence of a majority of those voting at a meeting. If you don't get a concurrence of those voting, no action is taken. And so you either affirm the planning commission or overturn the planning commission. And the result of that is nothing happens. And when nothing happens, that means the planning commission decision stands as it is.
Okay,
so, let's take your first suggestion, and I will move that the council tentatively uphold Appeal 2501 and approve the requested conditional use and direct staff to prepare findings and support of approval for council consideration on March 11 or a special meeting with a date to be determined.
What? I don't understand that. It just failed. So why are you making another motion?
Someone could change their mind.
Oh, okay.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call, please, Jen.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes,
Council President Kern,
No,
Counselor Hammond,
Yes.
Mayor Knopf.
No.
we tried.
Steve, you want to say?
Bill, feel free to chime in after I finish up here. So I think based on what's happened, the motion was made both ways. It ended up in a tie. In that instance, that means it fails. And so with regards to that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, we can either draft additional findings or we can, and bring those back for council to consider, for consideration and adoption, or we can just accept the plan commission's findings. So I would let Bill comment on that.
I would phrase it a little bit different, in that for the council to take any action whatsoever, three of you have to agree on something. And so we could draft findings and bring them back, perhaps findings for approval and findings for denial, and bring it back to you on the 11th and see, reach either somebody changes their mind or that there's a compromise of some sort. But if the council cannot get three people to agree on a course of action, then there's nothing that the council can do, because your charter requires concurrence of a majority of those voting to take any action. And so essentially, if you can't get to three of you agreed on a particular action, if there is no action, and the planning commission remains the decision of the city.
Okay. So if the Seagulls wanted to appeal that decision, they can go to Luba with, as if it was denied.
They would appeal the city's decision, which is the planning commission's findings.
Okay, to Luba. They could do that. Okay, all right.
Or resubmit.
Right. Or has Cameron indicated that we could get a group together and try to come up with a compromise? I mean, that's what I understood from what she said, that there's other ways of doing it.
I don't think the council should be involved.
Yeah, council can't be involved in that.
No, I didn't mean council.
Okay.
She's just saying that that's what she would like to see them do.
It would be nice
To get this Surfrider, and Surfrider's working right now on the breakers solution.
Right.
And, yeah,
So I think the big thing that needs to happen from a council perspective now is whether or not it's worth the time and effort of bringing you back any findings, or make the decision right now that you're kind of hopelessly deadlocked, and the plan commission and council you help me out here, Bill, that council would just adopt the plan commission's findings as their own.
that's what I'd like.
So unless you get three to have a concurrence, the question really is whether you want to continue this, if you think it's worth coming back on the 11th or not, for further deliberations. If you think it is hopeless that any change would happen, essentially what you would end up doing is making no decision. And at that point, tomorrow, Steve would send out notice saying the city's made its decision and here's the planning commission's findings. So the only action you can take requires a concurrence, and that would require three of you to either make a decision or agree to continue for something to bring back to you at the meeting on the 11th.
I think it makes the most sense to let the planning commission's decision stand. Because I don't believe we're gonna change our minds.
Do the rest of you agree with that?
I think, yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I don't know that we're gonna, I mean, if either of the opposing votes changed, it wouldn't change the outcome of it. So it would be one of you two would be the only one that would change the outcome of the vote.
Yep.
So should we,
Not a decision for me to
should
make.
we leave it open?
No, I think we should just let the planning commission's findings stand.
I heard that. I was kind of asking Barb.
Yes, I agree too.
Okay, yeah.
So Mayor, Bill, I'm just wondering if it wouldn't hurt just to summarize for everyone in the audience and the applicants what has just taken place. Are you okay?
So as I understand it, the appeal came before the council. The council became hopelessly deadlocked and cannot reach a decision. and I've decided not to continue the matter any further, which means that the planning commission's decision becomes a decision of the city. The planning director will send out notice of that decision, in due course. I assume the next day or two. I don't know Steve's schedule at the moment. And if the applicant or everybody else wants to appeal it, they can appeal the planning commission's decision to LUBA, and we will see what happens after that. If the council wants to do anything further to improve the code, they can certainly do that. If the applicant
Yes,
wants
please.
to refile its application, they can do that as well. And so, there's a variety of different things, but ultimately, the key thing that happens tonight is that the city council was unable to reach a decision, and the planning commission remains this decision of the city.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think there's definitely consensus that we improve our code.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
that's terrible.
thank you, Bill.
Thank you, and I don't envy the position you guys get put in by the code and matters that get put forward.
Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have good of the order.
I will mention one thing that we had coffee with the counselors this morning, and we had a question about a $7,000 budget amendment for HRAP that council handled at one time for
Resolution, a budget resolution, yeah.
for an ATV cover, essentially a top to the
No,
ATV.
It was a covered doors and some other item, 3 items. And it was in December 2023 again?
Right.
Yeah.
And I asked about it, and I've heard that that was never purchased, but it's in the fiscal year budget, the current fiscal year budget.
Again?
Is that accurate?
It's accurate.
It
I don't-
wasn't ordered?
Explain that to me, please.
The department head at that time was on an extended leave. And there was an interim department head. And the action was not taken to move forward with the purchase.
My understanding is that one of the items did come in the mail, and the person who was taking over had absolutely no idea why it was there, where, what, and reached out to the department head to try and understand what is this and where to come from, and received no response, and to this day has no idea why this was sent and why the other things weren't ever purchased or given any knowledge of them being purchased. I assume it was the department head who came before the council and asked for the money.
It happened while the department head was on an extended leave.
What happened?
I don't.
No.
I'm telling you what I know.
But I'm asking you, what happened while she was on leave?
She was not responsible for the operations of her department. There was somebody else that was responsible.
But if that person didn't know anything about this ordering of this.
Could have come to me.
Okay, well, evidently there was no communication about what it was supposed to be. Where is the money now and when's it going to be used?
The money was absorbed back into the budget in 24. It was in the 23-24 budget.
So it was never spent on what it was supposed to be spent on.
No.
So was that department able to make that purchase this fiscal year?
No.
Okay.
They'll be able to make the purchase in, well, it depends. If the council does another special resolution, it could be bought sooner. But it is Otherwise, it would happen after July 1st.
So in other words, the council would have to approve this money again for the same purchase.
Yes.
I don't know how that works. I mean, I'm really confused, Bruce, because if there's a resolution in front of council and they approve money for specific items, those items
For a specific year.
for a specific year, and that money and the items are not purchased, they can just come back the next year to ask for the money for the same items? That's weird.
I don't have all the details on it, but what happens is that if it's not purchased, the funds go back into the budget the following year, into the general fund. Or I'm sorry, into whatever fund it was. I don't have all the details. What there was an allegation today at a meeting. And I looked into it and I was asked tonight to go ahead and respond with what I know. And from what the pieces, I don't think they're connected, but with what I know, there was a person made an allegation. That person was actually in a position to have done something about it at the time, could have asked for other things, because I think the roof was purchased. And then there's the question that you're asking tonight about what happens. And I don't know exactly what occurred with these, the dollars. If it turned out that when they bought if they bought a roof, if the roof was the whole $7,000, that was all they could buy. I don't know yet. I don't know. But I'm just reacting and I want to be careful.
I didn't see it as an allegation at all. I saw it as a point of confusion on this person's part about that they were in this position of leadership and this thing comes in the mail and they don't know what it is and they don't know. So they call to try and find out where's this coming from, and they get no response. That's what I saw.
I thought the question that I was here, I wanted to have answered tonight was, what happened with the money?
Yeah.
Something was purchased and
how much?
The rest of it was not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like that answers that question but at least it satisfies what I felt was my commitment today to respond to that question. This sounds like there's more to this issue, but I'm not sure we should.
And I listened to the meeting and wondered if something was received, we need to find out where the roof is, if that's what was received. I mean, there was obviously something received.
Right, and how much did it cost?
Right.
Where's the bill for it?
Right.
How much was it? Maybe it cost the whole $7,000 for that one piece. I don't know. But there was 3 pieces that they asked for, the $7,000 to cover.
Right.
I assume that they had, evidence about what these 3 things would cost. And then one of them arrives while the director is out on leave and nobody knows. I mean, the money just went back into their budget evidently.
Well, it goes into, in their case, it would go into the general fund. It wouldn't be in HRF's budget the next year. It would be in the general fund balance.
So it just goes back where it came from, essentially. And that's fine. If it went back where it came from, that's great. I just want to know how much was spent, if nobody seems to know
Can we
that.
confirm that in an email rather than continuing the conversation tonight?
And there's also the possibility that part of the order it was all shipped and part of it got here and part of it didn't.
Right.
Right?
It's lost somewhere.
Yeah.
2 years ago,
Right,
so.
so we need to know
Clarification.
those things, but I think that can all be clarified as we know in an email to the city council.
Yes.
Okay.
I made a promise to try to get an answer and I just wanted to
I
follow through with that.
totally understand that. Yeah. Okay, anything else for good of the order?
I'll be quick.
Good of the order isn't for public comment.
Oh, it's not? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
tell you that we have been working on revisions with staff.
Okay, anything else, counselors, for good of the order? Okay,